I've used a lot of digital cameras in my life. My first, like many I'm sure, was some little point and shoot with a sensor the size of a grain of rice. And then I upgraded to a DSLR, specifically the Nikon D5200. And for a while, that was the best I could do. But then I got interested in filmmaking, and I realized that that DSLR just wasn't going to cut it. At the time, I'd heard of a little pocket camera by a company called Blackmagic Design. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the OG Pocket, after all it has a cult following now. But I just didn't love its form factor. I wanted something riggable. Enter the Micro Cinema camera. It has the exact same sensor as the OG Pocket, but in a mini box-style body. It was impressive for its size and its price. For only $1,000, you get HD Cinema DNG RAW recorded internally, full-size HDMI, and a tiny body you could fit just about anywhere. I shot most of my early works on that camera, including Wonder Over, Reality, First Act Season 2, and some of the first season of The Sunrise House. Now, my biggest complaint with that camera was the sensor size. It was tiny, a Super 16 sensor. I did get a speed booster for it, which helped a ton, but still, it was a pain. Without the speed booster, it had a crop factor of around 3 times. So a 50mm lens becomes a roughly 150mm lens. With the speed booster, it became closer to a 1.75 times crop, which is better, but it's still a worse crop factor than Super 35. Eventually, I sold it for the Blackmagic Pocket 6K Pro. It had a 6K Super 35 sensor, and it was quite the jump in quality. All of a sudden, we had a wider field of view without the need for a speed booster, better colors, internal NDs, Blackmagic RAW, which is great because I hate working with Cinema DNG, and overall just better image quality. It just had one major downside: the body. It was shaped like a DSLR, and I was not a fan of that. It wasn't riggable, and a rear-mounted external battery would completely block the screen, and that screen was one of the major selling points for me. At some point, I just got fed up with the form factor and decided that I needed something else. Not a replacement, necessarily, but something else. Something malleable in a way that the 6K Pro just wasn't. And that is what this video is about. The Blackmagic Design Micro Studio G2. It is, in many senses, an upgrade to the original Micro Cinema camera that I started on, just with a better sensor. And recently, Blackmagic dropped an update that makes this camera way easier to use. But it's still got its downsides, especially when used side by side with our current A camera, the Blackmagic Pixis 6K. So, let's get into it. The Blackmagic Design Micro Studio G2 is a tiny studio camera the size of my fist. It sports a 4K Micro Four Thirds sensor, the same one you'd find in the Blackmagic Pocket 4K. This means it has a 2 times crop factor, but with the right speed booster, you can reduce the crop factor to a wider field of view than Super 35. Here's a 50mm on the Micro Studio without a speed booster, with a speed booster, and here's that same lens on the Pixis in its Super 35 mode. And just for comparison, here's that same lens on the Pixis using the full sensor. The camera shoots in Blackmagic RAW direct to SSD and has a reported 13 stops of dynamic range. It can shoot up to 60 frames per second with no crop, and can run off of AC power, external batteries like a V-mount, or Canon LPE6 batteries like this one. It has full-size HDMI, micro BNC ports for SDI in and out, and a USB-C port for an SSD. When I used to use the Micro Cinema camera, my biggest UI gripe was the buttons. Anyone who's used this camera knows the pain of accessing the menu, and unfortunately, this camera is no different. Or at least, it was no different. And then Blackmagic did something amazing. They made it so the Pixis monitor, one of the nicest and most helpful monitors I've ever used, is now compatible with the Micro Studio G2. With just one USB-C cable, you now have a 5-inch touchscreen monitor with full camera control. This of course brings up the question, how do I use the Pixis monitor and record to an SSD at the same time with only one USB-C port? Well, thankfully, a simple USB-C hub will do the trick. You just need to make sure you have one that is compatible with DisplayPort. I've been using this one from Silor, I think? I don't know, I'll drop the link below. It's been working perfectly. The trick I've found is to power the hub from your V-mount plate. The camera doesn't have enough strength to power both an SSD and the monitor for long, so it'll disconnect after a bit of recording time. At least, that's been my experience. By powering the hub directly, this issue goes away. But the body only matters so much. Let's talk about image quality. Now, I'll admit off the bat, I'm not a fan of the small sensor look. Anything under Super 35 to me just looks a little off. But with a speed booster, I'm not gonna lie, this little thing impresses me. It does have some drawbacks, being a micro four thirds sensor, mainly in the shadow retention. This is certainly not a camera for low light shooting, but to be fair, I'm not sure any Blackmagic cameras are. The Pixis with its full frame sensor and the Pocket 6K with its Super 35 sensor honestly aren't that much better. The image is also a tad bit softer overall, but since it's got a smaller pixel pitch, that's to be expected. Like all modern Blackmagic cameras, you have different flavors of B-raw. The image is sharpest in 3:1 and softest in 12:1, but not so soft that it causes problems. I shoot most of my work in 12:1 these days, and it saves me a ton of headache and storage costs, while still allowing me to change white balance and ISO in post, and it gives me an overall more flexible image. The Micro Four Thirds mount is an active mount, meaning that it gives you single-shot autofocus with compatible lenses, and you can control focus through an ATEM switcher if the lens supports it. Some lenses even let you control zoom through an ATEM just over HDMI. Speaking of the ATEM, I should note that this camera is first and foremost a studio streaming camera. It was designed as a tiny camera body you can stick just anywhere in a streaming setup, and it does that job very well. You can color correct the camera directly from the ATEM software, control all of its settings, even trigger record. Paired with my ATEM Mini Extreme ISO, this camera definitely lives up to the hype. Any modern Blackmagic pocket cameras, or the Cinema Camera 6K, should be able to pair with the ATEM in the same way. But the size of this camera is just so helpful for getting those harder angles. You can easily use a super clamp and a magic arm to mount it really anywhere you want. But because they could, Blackmagic made this a perfectly functional production camera. Or, well, maybe perfectly functional is a stretch, but certainly very usable. Okay, I've spent a while talking about how much I like this camera. Let's talk about a few things that bug me. The first is, there's no internal recording. Sure, I know, it's a streaming camera, but it was nice on the Micro Cinema camera to be able to use SD cards. The only option for recording raw data on this camera is an external SSD, and it only records RAW. There's no option for recording in ProRes, H.265, or H.264. The second is the button layout. Much of that is fixed with the ability to use the Pixis monitor, but when I operate the Pixis itself, I love how many tactile buttons there are on the side. Buttons and dials aplenty. Sometimes I can get touchscreen fatigue with the Micro Studio camera. It also has no Bluetooth functionality, so I can't control it with a phone or the Nucleus Nano 2 the way I can the Pixis or the 6K Pro. The third is the lack of continuous autofocus. I know, Blackmagic isn't really known for that. And even though they're currently testing autofocus on the Cinema Camera 6K, and it'll likely make its way to the Pixis and maybe some of the pocket cameras, I doubt it'll come to the studio cameras, at least not this one. Right now, my main face cam for streaming is my Canon RP, solely for its continuous autofocus. The fourth is a more personal preference, but I just don't like Micro Four Thirds sensors. To be fair, I barely like Super 35 sensors. For me, size really does matter. The bigger the sensor, the better. This camera struggles at shadow retention and some color separation in a way that the Pocket 6K and the Pixis just don't. Maybe that's something to do with the color encoding on this camera specifically, but it's something I've found with most smaller sensors. Overall though, this has been a super fun camera to play with. I enjoy its tiny form factor, and the image that comes out of it is impressive, all things considered. At some point though, it'll likely stop being used for any production and will become a permanent streaming fixture if I don't end up just selling it. It was fun, and could be a first cinema light camera for people just getting started who want a different body from the Pocket 4K. And if you're running a massive streaming setup where focus doesn't shift much, then this is an amazing camera to add to your arsenal. But if you just need a main camera for a streaming setup, this isn't the one. And while it's a fun crash cam, it certainly shouldn't be anyone's A-cam long term. I'd buy it over the Pocket 4K, but not any of the other Blackmagic pocket cameras, or their full frame cameras. Obviously. If you have any questions about this camera or any other equipment that you've seen me use, drop a comment down below, and of course I will be sure to respond. Until next time, stay creative.